I know from your various raps in the past and from reading about you that you have a great deal of interest in classical music.
Yeah, I do. That's what I listen to mostly. I don't listen to too much rock and roll.
How come?
I don't think that it gets me off as good as some contemporary classical pieces.
Like what?
Well, my favorite composers to listen to are Stravinsky, Webern, Varese, and Penderecki. I think I find more things of interest for my ear in those composers than I do in any number of pop groups that you could name.
Do you think that there's a possible audience for, let's say, Webern or Penderecki?
Of course there is.
Where is it?
Well, that's beside the point. The audience exists. It's it's perhaps not as large as the audience for Grand Funk Railroad, but it's there nonetheless and is in need of servicing. There are some people who might be interested in hearing that music who have never heard it before and who might just like to go out and see what it does to their mind to get a little bit of it on them.
In the past, political types have talked of the music of Webern, the post-Webern, really, Penderecki and his friends, as being elitist music that's difficult for masses of people to listen to.
Then I would assume from that line of reasoning that the ideal music of all time must be that of the crudest form of rock and roll. I don't think that that's elitist music by any stretch of the imagination.
Do you think it's easy for people to listen to?
It depends on the person who's listening to it and what he expects to get out of it,
What do people come to music for, do you think?
Well, in America, mostly for entertainment. I doubt that they're going to derive as much entertainment value out of watching, say, a Webern string quartet performed as saying some rock and roll band who has a guitar player who eats his guitar on stage. That would probably be more entertaining for them. But I don't think that's down to what the music is really about.
Is the music of the Mothers of Invention influenced by your interest in classical music?
Yeah, I would say so.
How, rhythmically, harmonically?
Both.
Other than taking other people's work and using it for theme and variations as you do in the invocation and ritual dance and various other places in your work, do you think that there is a link between what we call the classical world and your music?
Yes, there is a link. It's rhythmic and it's harmonic.
Pierre Boulez says of Stravinsky that Stravinsky was the first person, specifically in the Rite of Spring, to write rhythm, that most of Western music until that time, starting with Palestrina, had written harmony.
I don't know whether I could agree with that 100%.
Do you think that you play harmony or rhythm, or a combination of the two?
I think that you're getting into some deep stuff right there, unless you want to get involved in a big philosophical discussion.
I do.
For a teenage radio station, you kidding me?
I'll kid you.
Okay. Well, it's my premise that you can have harmony constructed out of rhythms. That's the way I look at it. And without getting into a series of charts, graphs, diagrams, and explaining technically how all that's done. That's one of the things that my listening to forms of music other than rock and roll has brought to the performance of the Mothers. And I would probably tend to agree with Lucas Foss's evaluation of The Rite of Spring, although it's one of my favorite pieces. He feels that it's sort of like bigger and better Rimsky-Korsakov. In a way it is. It's more than that, but I think that the L'Histoire du Soldat has probably got a lot more going for it in terms of real innovation and its rhythmic vitality, interesting sonorities that just didn't exist in chamber music prior to that time.
You said you sort of wanted to put off a philosophic discussion. It's clear that, however, that you're into what music does and how audiences address music. You're quite obviously unhappy that the lowest common denominator seems so often to rise to the top, at least of the economic pile in American music. You seem to think that Grand Funk Railroad is something less than ideal. What is ideal? What is the music experience about, and what kinds of things do you bring to it? What do you expect your audience to do?
Well, first of all, I do not wish to state that Grand Funk Railroad is less than ideal. Grand Funk Railroad is ideal for people who like that kind of music, and I don't want you to misconstrue what I say. It's just that I happen to be interested in performing a type of music that perhaps is not as interesting to as large a number of people as the number of people that get off on that other kind of music, But I'm not interested in that other kind of music, so I'm not bothered with it.
I sat in an audience once and something didn't work on one of your amplifiers, or one of the amplifiers of the last of the Mothers bands, and people wanted you to play and were applauding. You came forward and lectured them on how they wouldn't know the difference anyhow, but it made some difference to you. It's not done often in pop music.
It should be done more often in pop music. It should be done in classical music, too. Because if it's not done, the audience is going to continue to come to a performance saying, merely entertain me. Just go up there and you be a jukebox, only we can see you moving around. And unless you do something to alter that image, it'll just stay the same forever. People will just go down there and expect musicians to be robots spewing off some kind of little noise that they can identify with. And I don't think that's what music's all about.
What then is it all? Are you interested in writing for some small segment of the population, or are you interested in raising the standard of audience listening habits?
I'm not interested in doing either of the above. What I'm interested in doing is writing music that I want to hear, okay? If there happen to be some people who have similar taste to me, then they would like to listen to that too. However, the music is made available to anybody who wants to hear it. The concerts are open to the public. The records are on sale to anybody who wants to buy them. The radio stations are free to pick and choose what they want to play. It's sort of a low-pressure operation,
But for those of us who have known Frank Zappa only through his records and the Mothers records, particularly over the years, and have come to love you and know you through that music, when they find that you're going on into areas which they maybe aren't prepared to go in, they are a little disappointed, and they say, why? And that's the only question that I'm prepared to ask.
Well, the question I'm prepared to ask is, why should somebody be disappointed? What's disappointing about having somebody do some exploring for you? If I'm going into an area that you're not interested in going into, fine, you stay home. I'll tell you what happened when I get back.
Send a postcard at the very least.
Sure, I'll do you a public service. I'll find out what's out there. The only problem is, if you don't go there with me, you're going to have to take my word for it when I give you my report. Now, that's not too smart, She should at least come along for the ride and find out what's happening out there.
Where are you going, Frank?
Well, I'm going just wherever I can,
You're going out into jazz and into Webern and to all those places?
I started off in Webern. I'm trying to get back.
Working your way home?
Yeah, I'm working my way back from Vienna.
Are you really interested in that kind of music, in atonal serial music? Do you compose in tone rows and things like that, or is it more American than that?
No, I started off composing serial music. I was writing serial music when I was 18, and I never had a chance to get any of it performed because I was living in a little town where there weren't too many musicians around who could read or play well enough to count the rhythm and read all the elaborate dynamic markings that are usually connected with serial music, because you serialize your dynamics as well as your pitches, and you can also serialize your rhythm. So I was doing that kind of stuff a long time ago, and
now you're wreaking your vengeance, eh?
What happened was I finally did get a chance to hear some of the serial material performed, and maybe it was the performance that I finally got of it, or maybe it was just that I decided to do something else, but I stopped writing serial music. I was writing all kinds of positive and negative canons and weird inverted this and retrograde that, and getting as spaced out mathematically as I could. And I was going, wait a minute. Who cares about that stuff, because I'd always liked rhythm and blues, so here I was stuck between the slide rule and the gut bucket somewhere, and I decided that I would opt for a third road someplace in between.
How would you describe that road, other than that you like the road?
It's winding.
Do you think that people are going to... I hate to put this question to you in terms of audience, but that's, through records and through radio stations and through Hollywood Bowl concerts, that's where it is. You think audiences are going to ultimately come to it, even if they don't come to it, say, the first or second time?
Well, let's suppose I do it and they don't come to it, but let's suppose somebody else that they like better does it because they heard us do it, and they do it. They'll go to it. If Grand Funk Railroad started playing serial music, they'd love it.
You think they would?
Sure, it'd be
Couldn't dance to it.
How do you know? All you got to do is keep a strong backbeat to it. Doesn't make too much difference what the pitches are. As a matter of fact, you start defining terms like serial and atonal and things like that. Well, feedback is atonal, and Jimi Hendrix used to do that up the ass. So what's the difference? If he had the right showmanship to present with that, and going into a serial framework might be just another logical extension. I wouldn't say that any audience in the youth segment is ready to bid heavily in the serial market right now, because they're too much oriented to laying back and grooving behind some musical experience. But eventually they may want to explore that because it just gives you a different feeling. If you've listened to very much of Webern's music and listened to it in the spirit with which it was constructed, it'll take you someplace quite far away. What I would like to say is this: the discussion of Webern in this conversation is almost blasphemous, and I would like to suggest that if anybody's got an opportunity, that they would go out and actually listen to Webern so they know what this discussion is about. First of all, for those of you who don't know, his name is spelled W-E-B-E-R-N. His first name is Anton, and he's dead. You understand? Then go to a record store and ask for, there's one album called The Collected Works of Anton Webern, and it's conducted by Robert Kraft. That's available in mono
on Columbia.
Yes, and there are also some other ones that aren't too shabby that are available on some European labels, like Philips has one of an Italian string quartet that's playing some of his string quartet pieces. That's very good. I can't remember what the name of the quartet is, but...
Quartetto Italiano.
Is that it?
That's it.
The one with the black turtlenecks on the front.
That's that.
Yeah. But go down and listen to some of this music and, see whether or not it's too abstract for your mind. I don't think it will be. I think that if you get over the initial shock of hearing how much space there is between the notes, and hearing that the dynamics are not extremely loud, and hearing that the texture of the music is something completely different than what you're normally accustomed to, I think that if you listen to it with a little sensitivity and appreciation, it might even get you off. It doesn't have much of a beat, but it is all right.
Give it an 83.
I'd give it 165. I would say that if there was anybody who has ever written music and been involved in the composing business that got close to writing some saintly stuff, it was Anton Webern, because you talk about a purist, you got it.
The Mother's early music, which was largely a product of your head, had one great enemy, the American high school. Other than that, you have not really attacked some of the things that became fashionable in the late 60s and early 70s to attack. Do you have a political stance that you like to talk about?
No, I don't have a political stance that I like to talk about because I don't wish to unduly influence anybody else's political stance. And as far as attacking things, the early music of the Mothers of Invention was not so much attacking as making some rather accurate comments about situations that existed. And it wasn't a question of picking some trendy thing to attack and then attack it so that everybody who also agreed that that thing that you were talking about was crappy could go, yeah, they're right on or something. You know, the things that I talked about in those songs were things that meant something to me. And when it became fashionable for other groups to make social political commentary in their material, and when I saw the results of the work that they had done in that vein, and I saw how superficial it was, and I saw that it was turning into a trend, and I also saw that the audience that was buying records listened to that stuff and said, yeah, that's really great. I said, I don't need to tell them anything anymore. You know, they don't need to hear that from me. They got all these other groups that are going, kick out the jams, et cetera, you know, and everybody's going, yeah, that's heavy. So I have some musical interests that I'd like to take care of.
Do you think that you'll come back to that kind of satirical content in your music after you've taken this road?
Well, I think that satirical content in music does not necessarily have to lean on the verbal aspect. You know, there are plenty of satirical things that you can do with a mere note or a mere inflection and never say a word. And it's unfortunate that the audience that thought that the satirical aspect as described above had vanished from the Mothers of Invention music was insensitive to those other aspects which remained in the music. In other words, they were so verbally oriented that by the time we had progressed into other forms of commentary, they didn't go along. You missed that road, boys and girls.
Getting away from talking about the high school and talking about society and getting into that whole trip that lasted, I don't know how long, a couple of years, I guess, in which you were traveling and were on the road and did incredibly long musical and verbal riffs about being drunk, horny, and on the road. And that was one of the things, especially in the movie, that a lot of people found like that you had done that trip, and why were you doing it again?
Well, that's not exactly accurate. First of all, it did not last 2 years, and second of all, the content of the music that the Mothers play is not 100% the result of me making people do things. The reason we're performing that is because it was a true story. It actually happened to Howard Kalin. You know, it was just a process of commemorating a piece of folklore that was peculiar to the group, and there was no reason why that shouldn't be saved. And I think that other groups who ignore the folklore that happens to the members within the group are missing a good shot for preserving a little history. Because I also take the position that contemporary history is going to be retained on records more accurately than it is going to be within history books. Judging from the quality of the rock and roll writers that are appearing in rock and roll publications, I would say they're not doing quite as good as the people who are actually making the records. So therefore, in 100 years, if people want to find out what was going on during this period of time, they'd be better off to listen to the source rather than to read the thing in print. Therefore, if we are involved in things that occur on the road with groupies and assorted weird events of a sexual nature, it's better that we tell about it ourselves in a musical format and do it with the people that it occurred to than have somebody else say, and then in 1971, one time when they were out on the road at the Mud Shark Hotel, you know, it's better to do it that way. Unfortunately, some people have a peculiar attitude towards things of a glandular nature connected with things of a musical nature, and they say, well, you know, music is so high, it's here, and glands are way down there, and, you know, we can't really get them together, and then they're hypocritical, because then they turn around and a group that comes in and doesn't sing overtly about those things, but couches their language a little bit and then does it with a little choreography, they think that's great and that's real rock and roll. And I maintain there's no difference. We were just honest enough to go out there and say, this is this, that's that, and here you are, and respond to it. And the response to it was, why, I'm hip, but of course I am offended.
Why don't you want to influence people about their politics. Do you think that anything politically can happen in America? You talk about American audiences and American people not being quite as, seems to me you're saying they're not as evolved as people somewhere else. Can anything be done through music?
I wouldn't like to be accredited with the statement that people in America are not as evolved as people somewhere else. That's your statement.
Thank you.
What I would like to say is that there is a problem in the United States where a lot of people have goodwill going for them, where they really want to do something on a cause or an issue and don't know how to go about it, and are offered a series of alternatives which aren't too appealing in either direction, and wind up choosing the lesser of two evils, and as a result of this wind up achieving very little in terms of, repairing some of the evils of society and so on and so forth. Because the merchandising in this campaign of the president and so forth is just as grim as it was during the last round, where the campaigning was aimed at the taste and the attitudes of the parents and the older voter. The same sort of grim machine is being employed right now. It's just the jargon has changed slightly, the packaging has changed, and it's being aimed in the direction of the teenage voter. And they perhaps don't know the ropes as well as some of the older, more disillusioned voters. It may be a vulnerable market for this kind of thing, and I just hope that it doesn't get conned into voting for something that won't really pay off. I mean, obviously it's necessary and desirable that people who are 18 have the right to vote. The question is whether or not they're going to be intelligent enough to do something better with it than what their parents did in the past. I'm just waiting to see that. I have great hopes, however, for the generation coming up within the next 40 years, the little kids.
Your kids.
Well, people who will have a better overview of media in its fully developed state. Like the generation that I'm from grew up through the development of television and has a different view of television than somebody who is, say, 13 or 14, because it was already an established fact from the minute they were born, and so it holds a different kind of position in their intellectual life, say. And I think that there will also be other developments of an electronic media nature between now and the next 40 years that will surpass that and will make a difference in the attitudes of the kids who are 2 and 3 years old right now. Give them a different perspective. Hopefully with a perspective that includes all of electric media and its tricks. Those people will at last be able to make some better judgments about the whole con game of politics.
What kind of tricks do you mean in media?
Well, just the way in which people who are interested in manufacturing and selling certain kinds of products or ideas present those products or ideas in a falsified format to the people that they expect to hype with them. Not just specifically commercials, but the whole idea that properly packaged you can sell anything to an American.
One of those lowly or evolved people. Do you tell your kids anything about television? Do you rap to them about what television is and how it works and what the tricks are?
Sure, all the time.
Because I do that with my kids, and it's a very, very, very difficult thing for me to do. What do you do with them?
Well, first of all, we explain to them that the people on television who tell them things are getting paid to say that. And they can understand that. So consequently, we take them places, and if somebody says something that appears to be a little bit mysterious to them, whether it's television or not, they'll ask us, is he getting paid to say that? And I think that's something to remember all the time. Is he getting paid to say that? Is he getting paid to do that?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Frank Zappa. I finally managed to find this radio station. Yes, this is quite an experience here, trying to open a bottle of beer. It's one of those imported kind with tinfoil that's covering the top, and The guy here's asked me how I like that record, and since the microphone wasn't on, you probably missed the fact that I'm deeply impressed by any song that fades out with the words ooh la la la. And I'm sure you are too, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this radio station. And so, what? Yeah?
Fade out a couple of songs with ooh la la la.
I think everything has to fade out with ooh la la. If you're going to fade out, you have to fade out with those words, because those are the magic words. There are 3 or 4 really important words that happen in rock and roll and other types of music that normal people like to listen to. Ooh la la la, considered as one hyphenated word, would be one of the important words. And the other thing that you definitely got to watch out for are the 3 other important magic words that make radio stations go off the air. But we won't discuss them right now. Those are the most powerful words in America today. That's why we have such a wonderful place to live in. Now, I'm here to play an album for you, and I'm rapping a little. Rapping is one of those words that you say when you go on rock and roll radio stations. I'm rapping a little bit at this point to prepare each and every one of you for the grand and glorious experience of getting your little cassette machines out, because I would like to have you tape record this album off the air, because this album is not going to be available in stores, because Warner Brothers is trying to ruin my darn career.
Tell us what happened as far as why this record is not being released, and how come.
Well, it's not very simple to explain, but I'll make a stab at it. And I don't really believe that people want to listen to a bunch of legal crud on the radio, but it's kind of unavoidable. Warner Brothers does not have the rights to this material, although it was delivered to them, and they refused to pay me for the material. And so I claimed a breach of contract and set out to negotiate with some other record companies. And in several instances, Warner Brothers interfered with those negotiations and spoiled the possibility of releasing this material elsewhere. First place they did it was with EMI, and the second place they did it was with Mercury Phonogram. And Mercury Phonogram was enough into the deal where they had made test pressings. They were ready to press the album. The cover was printed and so on and so forth. What you're listening to now is actual test pressings of the album that Mercury Phonogram had prepared. And at the last minute, Warner Brothers threatened them with legal proceedings and blah, 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 and so they backed out of the deal. And the way it stands now is my future as a recording artist is dangling in midair, pending court procedures, which in California, for civil cases, can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years just to get a day in court and have your case heard. So since I don't think that anybody wants to wait 3 to 5 years to hear my wonderful music, I've taken it upon myself to come down here and advise anybody interested in the stuff that I do to get a cassette machine and tape this album. You can have it for free. Just take it right off the radio. Don't buy it, tape it. This has been Frank Zappa as temporary bogus disc jockey, playing the Leather album for you, and now I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks a lot for letting me come down here and do it.
It was an absolute joy.
Well, I don't know
really
about that.
appreciate
Oh,
it.
come on now.
You're going-
That's probably more of my music that has been played on the radio in one blast. That's got to be the world's record. You probably lost all of your listeners. They're all seeking elsewhere for the safety pin through the cheek music.
I think they want to hear side 9.
They do. Well, and since there is no side 9, since Warner Brothers has seen to that, we're going to leave you with goodbye.
Again, thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this. I know you have. And ta-ta.